It was September 1980. A new school year was about to begin. 19-year-old Robert Shafran had decided to study at Sullivan County Community College, not far from New York City. In the first few weeks in college, Robert did well. The classes were interesting, and his classmates and schoolmates were friendly. In fact, some of them treated him as if they had known him for much longer. Almost everyone always greeted him enthusiastically, and several girls even greeted him with a kiss. Robert enjoyed his popularity but felt that something was not right. Ever since the first day of school, several students called him Eddie, which eventually made Robert think. Robert managed to find a room on the campus of the university grounds. Not long after he met his roommate, Michael Dormitz, the puzzle pieces slowly seemed to fall into place. The year before, Michael had had a roommate who looked exactly like Robert. Robert was an exact copy of Eddie Galland, who had just left campus. Everyone who had known him had apparently mistaken Robert for him. When it turned out that the two boys were also born on July 12, 1961, Robert was shocked. Did he have a twin brother walking around somewhere? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Michael decided to get together with Eddie so he and Robert could get to know each other. During that meeting, none of them could believe what they saw. The two boys were indeed similar. When they looked into each other's eyes, it was like looking in the mirror. The similarities were unmistakable. Both boys were broad-built and had the same smiles, eyes, dark curls, and big hands. The two had much more in common. They were coincidentally born in the same birthplace and had the same facial expressions, mannerisms, and IQ. They were both also adopted. To be completely sure, they decided to have a DNA test done. The test showed that the two brothers were twins. The story of the special discoveries spread like wildfire and even ended up in the local newspaper. Friends of David Kellman also read the article and found that the portrayed boys looked suspiciously like their friend, David. He was immediately informed of his alleged doppelgangers. When it turned out that David also was born on the same day and had been put up for adoption through the same agency, he decided to take a DNA test too. It matched the other two teenagers. Robert, Eddie, and David were identical triplets. The three were in shock. For 19 years, they had not known about each other's existence. Of course, they were happy that they had found each other. Although it was difficult to suddenly be confronted with this, the three men had a great deal of catching up to do. When the story became known, a media hype arose around the trio. Their story received worldwide attention. Initially, this had a positive effect because they felt strengthened in their further search for answers. The main question was, why had they been separated? The truth would eventually surface. The trio felt bittersweet about their discovery. They enjoyed all the attention, but also they knew that they might never find out the answers to all their questions. Nevertheless, they tried to make up for the lost time and spent a great deal of time together. It turned out that they also smoked the same cigarettes, and all three liked Italian food and had a preference for the same women. The triplets appeared in various talk shows, tabloids, and magazines and became regular guests in the most exclusive nightclubs of the time in New York. The triplets gained so much fame, they decided to jointly open a steakhouse in New York under the name Triplets. Unfortunately, the restaurant was short-lived due to business disagreements. The constant media attention also broke up the young men. The traumas of the separated past were too deep. There were so many unanswered questions. For example, none of the trio's adoptive parents had been aware that their baby had two brothers. They had grown up without any knowledge of the other's existence. Their divorced childhood and the lack of a shared past continued to permeate the brothers' minds. 20 years of our lives have been taken from us, the boy said. How can you do something like that with small children? How can you separate innocent babies immediately after birth? None of the three had access to information about their birth parents or other family members. What they did know was their place of birth and the adoption agency. All three had been taken care of by the adoption agency, Louise Wise, the largest and most famous of that time in New York. The adoption agency was founded in 1916 and had a good reputation. However, strange things had happened there. Dark plans had been made behind the doors of the adoption agency. The three boys were the victims of an ambitious, completely unethical psychological experiment after their birth. This research was called Nature versus Nurture. Psychiatrists worked with the adoption agency to research twins and the effect of genes on parenting. The idea was to split identical twins and triplets and place them in different environments. These secret experiments secretly took place in the 1950s and 1960s, involving dozens of children from socially weaker backgrounds. With this, the now-deceased prominent New York psychologist Peter B. Neubauer hoped to find out what was most decisive in human development, genes or education. Growing identical twins or triplets in different circumstances was the ideal research setup for this. Without consideration for the profound psychological consequences of such a decision, the idea was put into action, and all three brothers ended up in different families in New York. The triplets did not have an equal upbringing. According to the psychologist, this action was necessary in the interest of the study. Robert grew up in a relatively well-to-do family, Eddie in a middle-class family, and David in a worker's house. "We were seen as participants in the study," said David, "but we were just victims." Still, fate had brought them back together 20 years later, and they also revealed a long and hidden secret that might have spared other twins and triplets.